Matt Lewis is a senior contributor for the Daily Caller. He's also the editor of the new book, The Quotable Rogue, The Ideals of Sarah Palin in Her Own Words, which is a title that to many of our listeners will sound scary, but I would love to hear from you, Matt. What's the point of writing this book? Is it that you think Sarah Palin is much brighter than many are giving her credit for? Is it that she's being misquoted constantly? What is it?
Well, I think both. Probably the former is the most important, and it's not just my book that points this out. An interesting convergence, actually, the release of those emails in Alaska, which showed her to be more bipartisan than people think, smarter than people think, more credible than people think, and also the movie The Undefeated, which is a little bit different because obviously that has a viewpoint and it's edited. But still, I think that this book, it's interesting that those three things are kind of coming out at the same time. The other thing, too, you mentioned the misquotes. I think that sort of the most insidious examples aren't misquotes. It's when the press or the media focuses on something out of context, not really a misquote. But the worst example is I can see Russia from my front yard, which she never said. But I think most people probably still think she said that. And that was very much a caricature that made her appear to be this caribou Barbie type person.
The thing with that one, and I watched the interview you did on Morning Joe, and I've just been reading some of the other interviews you've done. So you went on MSNBC and you said a lot of people think Sarah Palin said I can see Russia from my front yard, and she didn't really say that, but a lot of people think she did. Fair enough, but the thing is, she did say, as Putin rears his head and comes into the airspace of the United States of America, where do they go? It's Alaska. It's just right over the border. And that was explaining to Katie Couric on September 24th of '08 why Alaska being near Russia gives her foreign policy experience. So even though the quote you mentioned is not actually her quote, she did say some nonsense about Russia and Alaska, didn't she?
She did say things, and I think more specifically, the Tina Fey quote was from, I think, an interview with Charlie Gibson, which I think was like just a couple days before the now infamous Katie Couric interview, where she said something to the effect of, there is land in Alaska where you can see Russia from the land in Alaska. I think it was probably a mistake for her to really point this out because,
I'll say.
well, I think there's truth to it, but I think that in politics, it's not just what's truthful or what's false. It's what's going to work and what's not going to work. And she was trying to explain the fact that that although she didn't have a tremendous amount of foreign policy experience, that her background as being governor and coming from the state she came from was a sort of a unique qualification.
You said, I think to understand Sarah Palin, it helps to understand that her tenacity was foreshadowed in high school. In that regard, a very telling quote is, everything I needed to know, I learned on the basketball court. And I'm trying to be completely honest. I've interviewed you a few times now, and our friend Bill Scher speaks very highly of you. And you strike me as very different than a lot of the Republicans we talk to. Is this completely honest? I mean, do you like Sarah Palin? You think she's a bright woman? I honestly am having a hard time convincing myself this whole thing is for real, Matt.
I do like Sarah Palin. I've gone through kind of ups and downs with her. I was a huge supporter of Sarah Palin before she was ever picked.
Right.
And I was encouraging her to be selected. My intern, Adam Brickley, actually, my intern at the time at townhall.com, actually started the Draft Sarah Palin website. So I was a huge backer of hers. I think during the campaign, she did a great job. I think that the McCain campaign really mishandled her. I disagreed with her quitting her job as governor. Later, I've come to sort of appreciate and understand why she did it.
And why is that exactly?
Well, I still think it was a political mistake, but I think she was focused on Alaska and her family, which are kind of more noble things to be thinking about. I mean, basically what happened is when she was selected to be John McCain's running mate, she had an 88% approval rating. So she was incredibly popular, and she was getting a lot of stuff done. And then she's picked as McCain's running mate. She becomes, I believe, an existential threat to the left. And people, really go after her. And it made her much less popular. As we see, she's much less popular today in Alaska, for example.
You know, I have to say, I completely disagree that she is this threat to the left and that the left sees that. I would love it if she were the Republican nominee. With regard to quitting the governorship for her family, right after quitting, she went on essentially a nonstop around the country tour. She wasn't even spending that much time in Alaska. So was she bringing her whole family with her? How is that more family friendly than sitting at the governor's office? I don't get it. And you know, Matt, it's like she can't name a single newspaper she reads until years later. She quits the governorship. She quits the bus tour. She's refudiating. She's accusing people of misunderestimating. She's talking about our North Korean allies. The quotes and the misquotes and all of that, we can look at individual examples, but the woman strikes me as completely incompetent.
Well, a couple things there. I mean, first of all, I think the excuse to spend more time with your family is always kind of dubious. So I don't know that her reason was to spend more time with her family as much as it was just to sort of remove them from that position where they were under this immense pressure, and really for no good reason, because frankly, her governorship had ground to a halt. She really wasn't able to pass any legislation or change anything at that point, unlike her early tenure, where, again, she had an 88% approval rating. I think that in terms of the gaffes, I think there's a couple things. I mean, not to over-rationalize, but, if we held Joe Biden up to a similar scrutiny, I don't know how well he would fare. A lot of politicians say a lot of stupid things because, they're on camera a lot of the time, and their political opponents will use it. I mean, Joe Biden's jokes about 7-Eleven, about his point about Barack Obama being, what was it, clean and articulate. His point, trust me, they will test this young. I mean, all those things. But for some reason, nobody seems to care when it's Joe Biden. I will also concede that I do think that some of what happened to Sarah Palin was the fact that she was sort of plucked from obscurity. I mean, most people who get to the pinnacle of politics do so over a long period of time, where they kind of dip their toes in the water, where they run for, U.S. Congress or Senate. Not that many people are paying attention. I mean, even Barack Obama, who's obviously a really smart guy, but he was in, more than a dozen debates with Hillary Clinton that really didn't get that much attention before the national spotlight was focused on him. Conversely, Sarah Palin was really airdropped into the middle of this thing. And then lastly, and then I'll shut up for a second, I would also point out, I do think that there is a cultural issue here.
I'll say.
Whereby people from Alaska, especially, but I would even say other parts of the country, the Midwest and the South, but especially Alaska because it's so far removed, where people from New York and D.C., let me find a way to say this without getting myself in trouble. But I think a lot of times, politicians from places like Alaska become part of the elite. Over time, they learn to talk like the folks from D.C. or New York and be part of quote-unquote polite company. And Sarah sort of eschewed that model, that paradigm. She is sort of a regular person from Alaska. And I think that her accent, the way she talks, is a turnoff to some people, some of the elites, unfairly. So, I mean, some of it's legit, some of it's not.
I'm more turned off by the things she says rather than how she says them. I still, deep down, I really feel like this might be satire on some level, this entire thing. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. Matt Lewis, senior contributor for the Daily Caller. The book is The Quotable Rogue, The Ideals of Sarah Palin, in her own words. Yes or no answer. Do you think Sarah Palin will be the Republican nominee? I heard you say on MSNBC she could be the next president.
Yeah.
Will she be? Do you think so?
I think she definitely could be. Today, if you ask me tomorrow, I might have a different answer. Today, I feel like she's not going to run. I'm like 51. I'm always like 51%, and today I'm 51%. She doesn't run. If she does run, she could win the nomination. Whoever wins the nomination could win the presidency.
All right, I say 99-1. She does not run, and if she does, she absolutely does not win. But we'll leave it there. Great to talk to you, Matt.
Good talking to you.
Okay, thanks.